Wisconsin Democrats have done it again. Today, they have introduced a bill that is 164 pages and strikes out the word mother at least 370 times. Hello, everyone. So happy to be here today, and we have a really special guest. Joining us is Governor Bobby Jindal, who hails from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and currently serves as the chair of the Center for a Healthy America at the America First Policy Institute. And a big hello to all of my friends at AFPI. You guys are awesome, and so happy that we could set up this interview. I want to provide some background information about Governor Jindal, so bear with me for a moment as I share this. It took me a while to condense this very impressive bio. So at just 28 years old in 1999, you became the youngest ever president of the University of Louisiana system, the 16th largest system of higher education in the country. You've taken on significant roles throughout your life, including leading Louisiana's Department of Health and Hospitals and serving as the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, all before the age of 30. Then you served 2 terms as a congressman and then elected as the youngest governor in the nation in 2007. You are renowned as one of America's most innovative public sector leaders. You have taken on substantial efforts to rebuild the economy in Louisiana after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. When you were in office, you cut the state budget by 26%, reduced state employment by 30,000 positions, and implemented Louisiana's largest income tax cut. As far as in healthcare, under your leadership, Louisiana transformed from a $40 million deficit into a surplus, 3 consecutive years, a surplus of $220 million. So you also, last but not least, you have honors. You graduated with honors from Brown in biology and public policy. You are a Rhodes Scholar with a master's degree from Oxford. Wow, wow, wow. That's a lot to say. And that's not doesn't even cover all of it. All of this, I want to point this out because I think your background and your experience are going to really contribute to the discussion that we're going to have today. So welcome, and thanks for being with us. I don't have nearly as impressive of a background. I'm a mom of 5.
No, you've got a very impressive background. First of all, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. Thank you for having me. Look, I say this not only to you, but to all your listeners. We were talking a little bit before we started about our kids and how well they've done. I applaud all the moms and the dads, but especially the moms out there. All of us that have had any success in our lives, we know that it started with our parents. I know we're going to talk about a lot of topics today, from healthcare to education. And the reality is, here's the most important thing. If you only remember one thing, we're going to talk about dozens of important topics. The most important thing is that moms are our first and most important educators, healthcare providers, caretakers. They are from whom we learn some of life's most important lessons. So I know you've done many, many impressive things professionally and personally, but I commend not only you, but all the moms out there that are listening. But thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for saying that. I always say this, there isn't anything that I have ever done or will ever do that is more meaningful or impactful to me than being a mom. It is everything to me. And I know you have 3 children of your own, and you're going to honor your wife and praise your wife for the job. It's a hard job being a mom, but it just means everything. And so before we start off, I do want to talk briefly just for a moment about what's happening in Texas. It's been painful to watch this weekend. Our prayers are with every parent in Texas right now that is facing loss. In moments like this, faith and community matter more than ever. I know that this must trigger for you some experiences that you encountered in Louisiana as your state had to overcome tragedy and loss because of Mother Nature.
No, you're so right. We're about to mark the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. It's hard to believe. It's been 20 years. Over 1,000 people lost their lives. Over $100 billion of property damage. Look, our hearts break when we see these awful, awful images and stories coming out of Texas. My wife and I, we personally had a group of friends that were down there. They were blessed. They went through a very harrowing experience. They had to break the window. They had to climb out to the roof of their cabin. They were just minutes away from being washed away. Tragically, even though they and their immediate family was safe, one person in their party did lose his life, and they came that close. They literally were talking about hearing the screams of some of the girls and some of the other victims of these awful flooding. We can't begin to imagine the heartbreak of parents having to bury their children. You can only imagine sending your beautiful child off to this summer Christian camp, this great, experience. So many of our children have been through that, have had these great memories of growing up doing these things. And you're exactly right, though, that in these moments, we really need to have our faith. We really need to have our community. And, as governor, as a father, I've spent so many hours trying to comfort families, whether it was parents who had lost sons serving abroad in the military, whether it was folks that lost loved ones in hurricanes here at home. And one constant theme I would share with them is through our faith, we know we're going to be reunited with our loved ones. We have faith we are going to see them again. I can't tell you how many times these families end up comforting me. I mean, you go to them to try to provide some kind of prayer and support, try to hug them, try to do anything you can. And so many times their faith is so strong. I do want to say that, look, the media loves to politicize everything. They love to try to make it somebody's fault. I think it's also important, however, to look at the heroes in this story. I mean, you look at the Coast Guard swimmers, the rescue pilots that saved dozens and dozens of lives. Look at the people that selflessly prioritize the well-being of others. We had one young man who sacrificed his own life but saved his mother, his fiance, his child. I mean, those stories don't get enough attention. These tragedies bring out both the best and the worst in human beings. We've seen the worst with the politicization, people trying to score cheap political points off the backs of this tragedy. All I can say right now is let's lift these families up in our prayers, in our thoughts. Let's not forget them. Let's also remember the heroic, not only first responders, but everyday citizens. We have something called the Cajun Navy in Louisiana. These are just regular men and women that jump in their boats, jump in their trucks. Whenever there's a natural disaster, they rush to help. They don't get paid to do it. They're not commissioned to do it. They're not hired to do it. They're just everyday people. They see a disaster, and most of us run the other way. They run towards it. They went to Texas to help. They helped in Katrina. And so let's keep these families in our prayers. But let's also remember the heroic, the selfless first responders. So many regular, ordinary American people that when there was danger, they didn't think about themselves. They tried to save others.
Yeah, I believe there was one, Scott Ruskin was one 26-year-old young man, saved over 200 children. And not only that, I was watching interviews. I was kind of glued to this all weekend. But in the interviews, some of those who he rescued and helped said that he was a calming force. He stayed with the kids. He got to their eye level. And I know I posted on X, like, thank you to the parents that raised such a good young man and such an example and such a hero. These are the stories that we should hear more about. And I hope every educator will start off the school year talking about this young gentleman and talk about heroism and not use any opportunity for politicalization, but instead to do what we need, stories we need to tell our kids of hero and sacrifice and valor in the most difficult times. So yeah, I think that's a good message and a good way to address this topic. And our hearts are with all of the parents, those who lost children. Maybe you sent your kids to this camp and you don't even live in Texas and you experience loss. And as a mom, I can't even imagine what you're going through, and praying for you and hoping that you find peace and comfort in these dark times.
Well, it's just, you're exactly right. And if you see the interviews with Scott on national TV, on local TV, he's such a humble man. He gives credit to his crew. He doesn't talk about himself. He talks very stoically about how he was trying to bring these young girls to higher territory, to other rescuers, so they could be triaged, they could be helped, so that he could go back and help others. You could just see this humility and sense of service about him. He's not bragging about himself. Every time a reporter tries to give him an opportunity, he deflects and talks about his pilots and the other swimmers and the other teams and the Texas National Guard and the other first responders. I'm just reminded, life doesn't make sense without faith. I mean, it really is one of these moments where, unless you believe in a risen Lord, unless you believe in an eternal God, unless you believe that there is purpose beyond this physical life, that we are eternal beings with souls, it's just so hard to make sense of life suffering, right? Like, how do you make sense? But with faith, these are incredibly difficult times. But with faith, we can get through this. We can try to make some sense out of these tragedies. We can try to say that there is something, there is a greater, that there is a God that knows and understands all and can comfort these families. But you said it right. Let's just hold these moms and dads in our prayers. It's the worst nightmare of any parent. We were talking to our kids, the worst phone call you can ever get in the middle of the night. It's never good news. No child ever calls and says, "Great news, Mom, I got an A on the test." It's always something that, just until you hear their voice and know they're okay, your heart just skips a beat whenever that phone rings in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I never understood why my mom, whenever she would hear about a crash, she'd call all of us like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like, "Mom, you're overreacting," until you have children and they're driving. And then you're like, wait, there was a crash on I-43. Wait, I'm going to call my kids. That's not you, right? That's not you. So it's that kind of call is the worst call to ever get. And it's, there were many children whose lives were lost and adults. So, and I think it's just gross, the politicalization of this whole thing. But I think for the most part, the majority of Americans don't fall for that. And they're helping out, they're reaching out, they're donating, they're praying, they're giving of their money. And some people are even coming and flying in to help, just like what you said. And so I commend all of the heroes in this. And, there's, what more can you say?
Look, we live in a good and decent country. There are always going to be the outliers, and they're the ones that get all the attention. They're the ones that go on TV and say hateful things. You saw some extreme, and I don't want to repeat their names. I don't want to give them more publicity, but you have some very extreme people that just hate so much that we're saying awful, awful things about these innocent girls and their families, and this tragedy happened. But what we saw in Katrina, what we saw here in Louisiana, was that the vast majority of Americans are generous people. And they donate whatever they can. They want to help. And if you're out there and maybe you don't live near Texas, or maybe you don't know how to help, there are all kinds of faith-based groups that are on the ground. They're you can pray. It's everything. Every little bit helps. Whether you say a quiet prayer, whether you remember these families, whether you send a donation, like you said, many have physically gone to Texas to help. Whatever you can do, it's amazing, these small acts of generosity, what they can mean to people when they're most despondent. And we saw it in Katrina. We've seen it time and time again in Louisiana. Complete strangers. For years we had youth groups and others come down here to help us rebuild people's homes and rebuild people's lives. And those are the healing acts, little by little. Those acts of kindness and generosity. It's planting the seeds of the gospel. It's being there for each other. That's what we're commanded to do. That's how we rebuild after these tragedies.
And I think when you have good leadership, like there was a big difference in the response of Katrina when you weren't governor, and then when there was another crisis and you were governor, there was a completely different response when you have really good elected leaders. And I think Governor Abbott is one of them. And and I believe that the Trump administration is going to be there to help with the rebuilding process. And that's the long haul, right? Because right now it's in the news, but they'll be weeks out, a month out, and all of these communities still have to rebuild, and they've been decimated. And that's when you really need good leadership, because it's going to take a while to rebuild.
You're exactly right. Look, I think Greg's doing a great job. I think the president's doing a great job. President Trump's already said he wants to come visit, but he doesn't want to get in the way. That's real leadership. He wants to be on the front lines. He has said he wants to go hug those families. He wants to be there. But he doesn't want to delay the response. He doesn't just want a media picture. He doesn't want to, land Air Force One in the middle of the rescue efforts, but he wants to come and provide comfort. He already declared a federal disaster almost immediately without delay. He made, Governor Abbott said it was very clear that the president said they could have any resources they needed in terms of rescue, search, recovery. That's real leadership. And it's going to the front lines. It's providing direct comfort and action. I will tell you, so we had to evacuate during Hurricanes Gustav and Ike, my first year in office. It was the largest evacuation at that time in the country. And so these federally provided contracted ambulances, not enough of them arrived in time. And that's, that just happens. There are always these great plans that don't always work out. The bureaucracy doesn't always work. But that was okay. We didn't have enough ambulances to evacuate the patients. We had enough ambulances just to ferry the patients to the airport. So we called Texas. At that time, it was Governor Rick Perry. We called up the state of Texas and said, look, you've got these Air National Guard planes that can handle medical evacuations. And we desperately need them because without these planes, these patients are going to die. But with these planes, we can evacuate in time before the storms come, before we lose power. And to their credit, they didn't hesitate. Rick sent those planes. He didn't say, well, what happens if the storm changes direction? What happens if we need the planes? He immediately said, of course, we're going to help. If we've got something you need, we'll send it. And we know that you'll do the same for us. That's leadership. And that's what you're seeing right now in Greg Abbott. That's what you're seeing in President Trump. Nobody's looking for credit. Nobody's worrying about, following regulations or getting permission. They're just saying, get the job done. We'll figure it out later. But let's just go right now. Let's go rescue lives right now. Let's go comfort people right now. Let's go rebuild. And we can worry about who gets credit. We can worry about all the paperwork later.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I'm grateful to the Governor Abbott, and to the president for the leadership that's been shown during this time. Now let's talk about some of the issues that we had planned. Moms for Liberty is an organization that places a strong emphasis on values such as freedom, liberty, responsibility. We value your efforts as a leader to reinforce these principles for families and kids in all that you've done. And one of the core beliefs of Moms for Liberty is that parents, not schools or government, determine what is best for children. And that's in school, out of school, and healthcare. Obviously, that's a big one. There's parental rights and responsibilities. So what advice would you give to our members, our chapter leaders that aim to influence our local school boards, our state legislators, and even our federal elected leaders on health and education policies? And specifically, how can parents prioritize both physical and mental health as well as parental rights?
This is such a great and important question. I think one of the biggest differences between what we believe and what the other side believes is something we talked about earlier, which is we believe that moms and dads, parents, are the best situated people to take care and raise their own children. They love their children. They want what's best for their children. They know their children better than any bureaucrat, better than any one-size-fits-all top-down government program. They are the first educators, the first caregivers. I want to tell you a quick story about what happened. We fought for statewide school choice in Louisiana. And in the middle of that fight, and we were successful with our fight, but in the middle of that fight, a teachers union official actually said this. He had the audacity to say that poor parents don't have a clue when it comes to making educational choices for their children. Let me say that again, because it's just such an outrageous statement. Poor parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their own children. Well, I thought this was incredibly offensive. We demanded the official apologize or be fired or at least reprimanded. The union doubled down. And I can't think of a better summary of how we think versus how they think. They genuinely believe that the so-called government experts, the bureaucrats, should supersede the rights of moms. Well, the very next day at the governor's mansion, we had a group of moms, and these happened to be, a lot of these were African-American moms, many of them single moms, that came together to publicly repudiate this union official and say, we love our kids. We know what's best for our kids, and we make great choices for them every single day of their lives. It's just what the controversies that have come out, the scandals, the information that have come out And you talked about both education and healthcare. Let's go back to healthcare. You go back to the COVID vaccine mandates, which we all fought and we all saw as heavy-handed by the Biden administration. They were forcing people out of the military. They were trying to force people out of jobs. They were trying to force people out of school. They were trying to say you couldn't go travel. And fortunately, a lot of brave individuals try to fight this in the courts. But now what's coming out is that they knew, one, that the interventions they were trying to force on us, whether it was masks or distancing or vaccines, weren't as effective as they claimed. It turns out they knew that this wasn't going to accomplish what they thought. And secondly, they knew there were negative side effects, and they hid that from us for some time. They knew, for example, the COVID vaccine had negative effects on especially young boys' health, heart health, in terms of myocarditis and other complications, side effects. They knew this, and they hid this from us. To me, it's just shocking that the government officials that are supposed to work for us, by the way, we're the ones that pay the taxes. We're the ones that they're supposed to work for, thought that they knew better than us. They could hide this information from us. So I think the most effective voices in these debates are the parents or the moms. It was one thing as governor when I fought for things like school choice, when I fought for the dollars to follow the child instead of making the child follow the dollar. It was great when I went to the Capitol and fought for that. It was more powerful when the mom showed up. And I remember there was a legislator from it was a Democratic legislator from an inner city district that never voted for this and came to me one day, finally, after years of fighting us, and said, Governor, I've got to be with you. And I said, well, what convinced you? And he said, going home to church, he had so many parents thank him for school choice. They thought that he had support. They didn't realize he'd opposed it. And he said it was just, he even had his pastor publicly thank him in front of the entire congregation, assuming that he had supported this. There's no more powerful voice than moms showing up at the Capitol, showing up in their school board meetings and saying, these are our children. And here's the real face. I'll tell you, there was one mom in particular that's always stayed with me. And her story was very simple. She said, look, I work multiple jobs and I'm trying to save so that my child can go to a better school. She lived in a district where she had a failing public school. It was filled with not only low academic scores, she felt like it was filled with violence and it was a dangerous place for her child. She wanted her child to go to a better school, a local private school, where there was uniforms, there was discipline, there was faith-based instruction. And this poor mom was working multiple jobs, saving every dollar she could. To me, this is the American dream. This is, we were talking, this is what our parents did for us, right? They saved, they lived, they sacrificed, they did without, so their children could have a better quality of life. She was doing everything we would ask her to do. She was working multiple jobs, she was saving, she wasn't looking for a government handout. She just wanted her child to be able to get a good education, so that she wanted her daughter to have a better future than her. She was willing to work these hard minimum wage jobs, but she wanted her daughter to get an education so that her daughter could do better and get better paying jobs. That's America. Look, that you can't get any more, but I think when legislators hear her story directly, that's so much more powerful than a politician, than an academic, than a theoretical debate. And I think sometimes you can even shame the other side into doing what's right. It's hard for them to look in the face of their constituents and tell them, because supposedly they're fighting in their name and they spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars. They waste their dollars. All this mom wanted was a fraction of the money that was being spent on her child's behalf to actually benefit her daughter. And here's the final hypocrisy. Many of these so-called, these bureaucrats, these so-called experts, they want us to do things to our children they don't do to their children. You ask them, where did their children go to school? You ask them, what kind of healthcare did their children get? It's all this, we're going to make one set of rules for you, and we're going to exempt ourselves. It all comes down to where we started. Parents know what's best for their children. And it really it's that simple. The other side doesn't believe it. We do. That's what we got to fight for.
Oh my gosh, I have so much that I could say to everything that you said. School education was a life raft for me. Neither of my parents graduated high school. My mom had a 9th grade education. My dad dropped out his junior year. He joined the Marines. He, got his GED and was able to turn his life around through military service. And he was a union worker. So education was so important for my parents, and they made sure that I was educated. My mom got a job waitressing at night. My dad was a janitor as a second job, just to put us in a private school, just a small little Catholic school. And we also had, when there wasn't choice, we had some scholarships. And if it wasn't for that, I know I would not be where I am today. That education gave me the opportunity to go to college and onward, go to law school for my brothers and sisters. And then now my children they're well educated. It changes that generational kind of what curse like that can happen where, you low income, not able to graduate high school, and that cycle, that vicious cycle perpetuating. A good education can disrupt that and change a child's life and then generations to come. It's so important. And in Wisconsin, when we have got rates of reading among Black children as low as 5% of Black children in Milwaukee can read at grade level. It's criminal to me. It's absolutely criminal. And all they want is choice. All they want is options. They just want safe schools. They want to send their kids to schools where they're safe and they can learn to read and they can get an education so that they can have a different life. The most amount of money, and as governor, that schools in the cities, in areas where there's a lot of need, where low income, more disadvantaged groups live, the spending is quite high. It's very high. But where's the money going when the results are dismal? And there are people like Marva Collins. There's all sorts of charter schools that prove with far less money, they don't have fancy buildings. They don't need the fancy buildings or a lot of money. They just get some good teachers and some good leaders and eager children and parents that want their kids to learn, and miracles happen. And that's why I support charter schools, school choice, any kind of life wrap that we can hand parents that are desperate.
You're exactly right. And your story resonates so deeply with me. My dad was one of 9 kids, the only one that got past the 5th grade. And so for him, it was incredibly important that his kids get an education, just like your story, just like what you wanted with your kids, what your parents wanted for you. And it changed our lives. Look, I wouldn't be here today if my dad hadn't gotten that education. And let me tell you something, when we were growing up, he expected, it was, the teacher was always right. You never talked back to a teacher. I remember when I'd come home, like if you got in trouble at school, you get in trouble at school. Then you'd get in trouble when you got home with your mom. And then you really got in trouble when your dad got home. You often would get spanked if you'd done something bad. And I would if you try to argue with my dad, I would tell him, if I try to tell my dad, well, I didn't do what the teacher said, his reply was, well, I know you got away with something else, so I'm just going to punish you for that. There was no talking back. There was no, it was just a different world. One of the things teachers will tell you today is a lot of times they can't have discipline in their classrooms because they're just not supported, right? The parents don't back them up. The school systems don't back them up. But you're exactly right. So it's been in New Orleans, we now have 100% of the kids, or over 95, 99, I think it's 100% of the kids are now in charter schools or in school choice or in some forms of school choice, whether parents want to homeschool, charter school, parochial school, or traditional public school, whatever is best for their child. And that's the difference. We're not saying that you have to do it the way that we did it. We're simply saying you should, as the parent, you as the mom or dad should have the choice. And, especially when you see some of the recent social fights we've been having, it's not just COVID. You think about the left wanting to indoctrinate our children. They want to have boys play in girls' sports. They want to take, they misunderstand the role of values and faith in the public square. And they really are pushing this extreme worldview. And so education, it's not just K through 12 education. You're seeing the same fight with our universities. These universities that were founded as places to search for truth. Most of these first universities were actually Christian seminaries, but they were all founded to pursue truth. Now, instead, they've become these social justice indoctrination groups where professors and students and administrators, over 90% of some of these campuses, all think the same way when it happens to be a radical liberal way. And you saw this especially after October 7th with the anti-Semitism on these campuses. I'm so glad the Trump administration is trying to crack down on the worst of these abuses. But at a time when you've got this indoctrination happening in schools, of course, parents should be able to share their values with their children. And so now you have two extreme events. So you've got in California, they're trying to pass laws saying, well, no, the teacher doesn't have to tell the parents. The teacher can indoctrinate the students and hide that from the parents, which is just amazing. It's just ridiculous. But on the positive side, you've got the Supreme Court ruling just recently that, of course, parents have the right to take their kids out of instruction that's offending to their most basic values, to their faith. And I think so many moms and dads just feel like that their values, their faith, what they want their kids to learn is being assaulted from everywhere by the popular culture, by the media, and so thank goodness we've got a president and President Trump. He's got an education secretary. We've got conservative judges that actually want to read the Constitution and the laws, not just create them, that are trying to restore parents' rights, that are fighting to restore that balance. And school choice is one way to do that. Here's the difference between the left and the right. The left says, we want to make you embrace our values. You have to abandon your most deeply held values. We're not saying that to the left. We're simply saying, we want you to leave us alone so we can educate our children the way that we want. We want you to give us the same respect we give you. We're not saying that we want to go tell you how to raise your children. We're simply saying, let us select what we know what's best for our kids. And some kids will thrive in a large public school. Other kids will thrive in a homeschool environment. Some kids will thrive in a parochial school environment. And we, my wife and I, we're raising, I can't say we've raised, we're raising 3 kids. They all picked 3 different high schools and that was best for them. And that's great. And we let them do that because it was what was best for them. And that's really the difference between the two sides. They believe they've got to tell us how to raise our children. We simply want the freedoms, the God-given freedoms. And let's remember, we've talked a lot about education and how important it is. And it is. It's a great way to help people get better jobs, earn more money. When you look at all the positive correlations between education and staying out of trouble with the law, not being going to poverty, not being dependent on government, but the fundamental reason we have public schools and public education in America, the fundamental reason that from the founding, you go back to the beginning of this country, the reason education was so important is in a self-governing republic. We need our citizens we need our children to become self-governing adults. We need to train them to think for themselves so that they can make good decisions for themselves and their community. At the core of it, that is fundamentally why the government, why the public needs universal education. The rest of it is great. Like, it's great that it helps you get a job. It's great but education is not first a vocational endeavor. It's about being a self-governing republic, teaching our children to be self-governing adults who can be responsible citizens in this republic. And the left doesn't want to do that anymore. They simply want to silence, censor, and indoctrinate. If you don't agree with them, if you don't adopt the latest woke ideology, they want you to be quiet. And what we're saying is we're for free speech, we're for open debate, and we're for parental choice.
Everything you said, I agree 3,000%. It's so great. I am going to bring on my friend and colleague, Missy Karwowski, because I'm sure she's like biting at the bit to get into this conversation. But I just had to say, our motto is we do not co-parent with the government. So hoorah to everything that you said. We are not trying to tell other people how to raise their kids. We just don't want to be told how to raise our kids. And we find it immoral and offensive that when our kids are in the classroom, a place where they're mandated to be by government, they have to go to school, we have to send them to school, that there are educators or administrators taking advantage of that position and indoctrinating our kids into worldviews that they know that we as parents, we don't want. We're not asking for our kids to get sex education at 5 years old, and we don't want to talk about gender ideology with young kids who don't understand, and they're imposing their will upon our kids. And thank God for the recent Supreme Court decision and Mahmoud v. Taylor that just basically reiterated what we know to be true, that parents raise children, not the government. So Melissa, welcome.
Thank you. And I am so excited to be representing M4LU here with, we've got the Moms for Liberty media all together, the media team.
Yep.
Well, I'm particularly excited to talk to you because, as we know, the next school year is fast approaching, and M4LU will be covering some really exciting new topics that we think are pretty top of mind for parents. And September's topic is actually going to be, we've called it inputs to opt-outs. So a little bit of what we were already talking about here. And we're going to explore how kids in schools are impacted by food and pharma, and then options for healthier living. So I know you have some great background and experience working towards a healthier America, such as the limitation of food additives, thank goodness, and SNAP reform, which is still kind of amazing to me that there was challenges with just making sure people can't buy pop and soda, whichever your word is. I don't want to offend anybody, whether you call it soda or pop. So I'm excited to talk to you, though, about food at school specifically. I would love to just dive into this. And so when we think about school lunches and snacks, not just lunches, schools are sadly notorious for serving very questionable food, from mystery meat to pink slime. And for me, possibly the most unbelievable takeaway I have seen in my research is that according to Congress, pizza is a vegetable, which I don't know any parent that would agree with that. And additionally, this one shocked me too. I do not remember this, although I would have been very happy as a kid if this was a case in my school, that many schools actually now have contracts with fast food restaurants, and there are some that they have a different featured fast food every single day in the lunchroom. So kids have that access, like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, which, is God's chicken. So I might be okay with that one, but this is, Chick-fil-A I'm good with, but this all is just absolutely ridiculous. So as we're moving into this kind of MAHA world, which is fabulous, with all this new awareness and understanding of how nutrition and food actually does impact our kids, we know that it contributes to hyperactivity, obesity, and poor learning outcomes. So I'm curious, why are schools even still serving these ultra processed foods full of dyes, sugars, and seed oils? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a great question. I was not aware that schools were outsourcing to fast food restaurants. I hadn't seen that in our kids' schools. But I will say, look, thank God for President Trump and Secretary Kennedy putting a spotlight on this MAHA movement. For years, we've seen these really just rapidly escalating rates of childhood obesity, anxiety, all these chronic diseases. And up till now, the health industry's response has been, well, let's just give them another pill. Let's just give them another drug, as if that was going to solve the problem. It really comes down, this sounds very simplistic, but it really comes down, and I'll get into the specific policies, but it really comes down to what our moms all taught us, right? Growing up, our moms didn't, at least my mom, she never told us, no, you can never have fast food, but she certainly said you can't have it every day. I mean, you could have treats, right? And for example, Friday night was pizza night, and that was the one day we could drink soda. And to this day, when I eat pizza, my mind just thinks I'm supposed to have soda, because that was when I was a kid. That was the only time we were allowed to have soda. And so like when we raised our kids, we told them they could only have sodas on vacations. So they drank, you would have thought they were camels on vacations. They drank every soda they could find, but now they don't, none of them really has a taste for soda. They really don't, like as older kids, they only drink a lot of soda. Same thing with desserts. Like our moms, they didn't say you can't have sugar, but they said you can't have like sugar at every meal or constantly. It was a limited treat, but you had to eat your vegetables. You had to eat, you had to finish your healthy foods before you could have something like that. So when you think about what's happening in our school cafeterias, this is crony capitalism at its worst. When you wonder why this is happening, follow the dollars. And so here at the Center for a Healthy America, we did a report recently, and we said, why is it? Because these big food companies, by the way, that sell foods all over the world, they're able to make healthier food products in other countries. It's, and the famous examples, the Fruit Loops in Canada versus America. It's not that it's healthy in Canada, but at least it doesn't have the petroleum-based dyes, right? They use plant-based dyes there. My daughter went and spent a few months in Europe as a student abroad, and she was amazed. She said, Dad, she came home and she noticed a couple of things. She said, at home, a lot of these foods make me sick. There, she felt so much healthier. She could eat food she wasn't allowed to eat at home. Like at home, she's worried about, dairy. She's worried about gluten and all that. But over there, she could eat some of those products and it didn't bother her stomach. She also noticed, however, that she had to go to the grocery store more often. Like she said, you buy food. I don't know if you've tried this. Certain foods in America you buy and you leave it on the counter, and a couple of weeks later, it looks exactly the same. Or when your kids are young and they drop that McDonald's French fry or the Twinkie or whatever down in the back of the car, and you find it 3 months later and it looks exactly the same. And that's not natural, right? There's something wrong with that when food doesn't get bad when it's been exposed for that long. So we looked into this, and what happened was decades ago, our food authorities, our regulators fell asleep at their jobs. They basically told the big food companies, you no longer, once upon a time, you used to have to tell the government before you put an additive in food. Kind of makes sense, right? Before you put a chemical or an artificial ingredient, tell us what you're going to do. The FDA basically went to the industry and said, you know what? You can self-certify that your ingredients are safe. You don't even have to tell us the ingredients you're putting in your foods. And third, when the companies actually certified these ingredients were safe, they were paying the scientists that did the studies. Well, guess what happens? If I'm getting a check from a company saying, I'd like you to tell me this product is safe, I'm more likely going to find it safe because I know who's paying me, right? You follow the incentives. The result is versus Europe, where they said, their regulators said to food companies, before you put any artificial ingredients in foods, tell us what they are, and we're going to independently test whether they're safe or not. We're not going to rely on your word or for it. In America, we have over 6,000 additives in our foods. In Europe, they have just over 400. Now think about that. Over 6,000. You read the ingredient list on many of your food packages in the grocery stores, you can't pronounce half these ingredients. You have no idea why they're in there. And the artificial dyes are a great example. They don't even serve a purpose. They're not a preservative. They're not like there to enhance the taste. They're just simply there as a marketing gimmick to make us want to buy more of these foods because they're brighter. And the studies have shown that children gravitate towards brighter candies or brighter cereals. The candy industry's already admitted it. They've said, hey, look, we try to take the artificial colors out, but kids like the bright. Well, of course, kids like brighter colors. I mean, that's not rocket science, right? And so it's really the financial incentives. And it's a shame that we've got these food companies that they're giving our kids artificial ingredients. They're giving them junk food. It's cheaper to make. They're higher profit margins. But a lot of the same companies are making healthier versions of the exact same products in other countries. So a couple of things have to change. Here in America, we both need Congress to act and the FDA to, and I'm confident under Trump's administration leadership, the FDA will take action. They're already starting to do this, but we need the Congress to act. Food companies should have to disclose all the additives to the FDA. They shouldn't be able to hide anything. Secondly, we should have an independent audit of those 6,000 plus additives so they're not relying on their own studies, on their own experts. And third, we should have going forward, we should have independent verification of any new additives put in our food. So it shouldn't be the companies just telling us, don't worry about it. We've decided it's safe. We should say, no, we're going to hire independent scientists. And they're not going to be conflicted. They're not going to be taking checks from the big food companies. And I think by that way, we can get more natural foods, locally grown foods, organic foods, healthier foods. But it's a lot of words to say our moms were right? Like when our moms told us, you can't have Twinkies for every meal. You can't eat Oreos by the bag. You can't drink soda all the time. We all know instinctively you can have treats. Look, I'm from South Louisiana. We say soda, not pop, by the way. But we eat a lot of unhealthy foods down here. We're known for our rich Cajun foods. We're known for our soul foods, our Creole foods. We're known for like rich etouffees. We're known for fried chicken. We're known for a lot. But we also know we have to do it in moderation. We also know that you have to eat your green vegetables. We also know that you can't eat thousands and thousands of extra calories. And so I think if you follow the dollars, you see the corruption of our diets in America. The final thing I'll say is we have to break up these oligopolies. What happens is when there's not competition, you have a handful of big food companies that control so much of what we buy. So even if a mom and dad is trying to be healthy, if you're trying to buy what's good for your kids, it's really, really hard to find products without these ingredients. It's really hard to buy affordable ingredients. And I don't blame parents. Look, when you're on the road, when you're in a rush, it's hard. And it's sometimes it's unreasonable to expect a parent to go into a grocery store and resist every aisle, every packaging, every advertisement, everything that's designed to hook our kids. And so that's why I think Congress needs to come in and say to these industries, disclose your ingredients and we're going to test them. You don't get to tell us what goes in our food. We're going to tell you.
How can you be against that? I don't even understand. Like, what's the controversy here? I mean, up until 5 minutes ago, I thought that we all wanted eating healthy food for kids. It's really shocking to see those on the left opposing this when that was sort of that they used to kind of care about these things, and they used to be against like all these big businesses and big, corporations. And now suddenly it's sort of a really interesting dichotomy, a real switch where we are the ones now more awake and fighting for the health of our kids. And, Melissa, what you said, it had me thinking, how many kids are getting their lunch subsidized by the government, and not just their lunch now, their breakfast. And if they're ordering McDonald's, then the government is subsidizing McDonald's. And
I'd have to check on the actual, like the way the funding goes through for that, because I don't believe it goes that way. It's more what that actually leads to my next question, which I think is very interesting, is who is really responsible for feeding kids at school? Is it actually the responsibility of the government? And this is going to be a really controversial question, because I know the argument, and I fully hear it and empathize with families where many families that their kids' only meal or primary meals happen at schools. And that is horrifically sad. And, we can have that debate all day long of, do we have personal accountability and responsibility for the parents to be paying for their own kids, or is government supposed to ensure the health of the children? And you mentioned subsidies. So that's the first part of the question. You mentioned subsidies. And what I have to wonder is, why can't we subsidize the healthy food? Because what you mentioned there before, like when we're traveling and parents are supposed to resist all of these options, it's a challenge when you're looking in the grocery store. Well, why can't we subsidize the healthy options so that they're easier and more affordable as well? So that we've got two parts. Is it up to the government to pay? I don't know. And if we are going to subsidize, why couldn't we be subsidizing the healthier products?
Look, Melissa, that's a great question. And that it goes to the heart of the whole debate in SNAP, and also school lunches, but also in SNAP, where basically the government is funding both sides of the war on obesity, right? We're paying for the soda and the candy and the junk food, and then we're turning around and paying for all the treatments and the heart disease and everything that comes with it. And the big pharma answer is, well, let's just give everybody a pill. That's not the answer. We're not going to, if you listen to them, we would put GLP-1s in the school lunches and give that with the Twinkies and the chocolate and everything. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. And so when you really think about the good news, because we've talked a lot about the challenges, the good news is there are some positive solutions happening. So states are beginning to act. West Virginia passed a law saying, let's take the dyes out of our foods. Let's take, we know some of these dyes, there have been studies linking some of these dyes to hyperactivity and behavioral problems. So why would we allow them to sell this in our food? I hate to say something almost positive about California. California is taking action to get rid of some of these dyes in their foods. Many states, Arkansas and other states, have applied for and now gotten waivers from Secretary Rollins up at the Department of Agriculture to say, look, we don't want to use SNAP benefits. We don't want to use these dollars, these federal dollars, these state taxpayer dollars. We don't want to use these taxpayer dollars for junk food like soda and candy. And we're not saying that parents can't buy those things, but we shouldn't subsidize that. If they want to buy that with their own dollars, that's fine. Because you ask, where's the responsibility? I don't think there's anything wrong. And here's, I think, again, the difference between our side and their side. And you're right. Your earlier comment, Scarlett, about how the left has this Trump derangement syndrome. So President Trump is for healthy foods, so they're against it. And you come up, sometimes think you're in a bizarre world. Like, wait, so the left is now for making our kids eat fried chicken and drink soda? Like, I don't understand. What world are we living in? Like, where have we woken up? But, having said that, we have seen some real progress where, and the real distinction is the left says, no, we want to mandate to adults and everybody what you can and cannot do. You can and cannot do this. We're not going to let you have this. What we're saying is parents should have better choices. We shouldn't be subsidizing the bad choices, and the parents should have better information. There should be better labeling on the foods. There should be better. So you as a parent, it should be easy for you to know this is healthy for my child or this is not healthy. And that's why the disclosure of the ingredients is so important, so that we can know. Because right now, I don't blame parents. If you have no idea the chemicals are in the food, how do you protect your child from that? Like, how do you know which is the healthier? And a lot of these products are very misleadingly labeled, where they pretend to be healthy because they know it's good marketing. So when it comes to the parental responsibility versus government responsibility, I think the government has a role in doing a couple of things and doing them well, which and the left wants the government to do everything, so it does nothing well, I think is a problem. One, I think it's the government's job as a regulator to make sure we've got information, right? So we as parents they should enforce a fair marketplace where we know the food that we're getting is safe, that it's transparent, that we know what's going into the food. They should give us the information through labeling requirements. I want to know the country of origin. I want to know where my food's coming from, right? I don't want somebody to be able to import this food and mix it with a couple of ingredients and say, oh, it's processed in the USA. Well, what does that really mean? Has it been grown here? Is the livestock from here? Is the beef from here? Is the chicken from? I want to know, where is it from? I'm going to come to another issue, by the way, which I think the government needs to crack down on. So one, I think that's a core government function that they've not been doing. Secondly, to the extent that the government is subsidizing, whether it's SNAP or child lunches for kids that can't afford their meals, or wherever the government is subsidizing food and other things for our children, at the very least, let's stop funding both sides. Let's stop funding the stuff that we know is bad for our children. And we know that, Secretary Kennedy talks about, and there are different numbers depending on how you measure it, 8% or whatever percent of the SNAP benefits that are being used for soda and candy and junk foods, whatever it is, it's too high, right? So whenever the government is funding, let's crack down on that. But one of the things I want to mention, because I mentioned the oligopolies in the big food industry, there's an oligopoly in a lot of the processing industry as well. And you've got foreign entrants. You've got, the Chinese and the Brazilians and others that are spending a lot of money buying up this capacity. This is slightly unrelated, but a very important announcement today from the Trump administration saying we want more domestic control over our food supply. And so one of the things they announced today was, for example, cracking down on the Chinese buying farmland in states, sometimes near military installations. But when you talk about food security and healthy foods, I certainly don't want foreign actors who may not have our children's interest owning so much of our food supply chain. To me, that's a national security issue. We have historically been able to feed ourselves and help feed the rest of the world. We don't want to be in a position, just as we've allowed China to take over so many other critical industries. And now President Trump's trying to fight back. You look at how they're trying to choke off rare earth minerals to our defense industry and critical technology industries. I don't want to be in a situation where a communist-controlled company or a foreign-controlled company can threaten our food supply or alter our food supply. So I commend the Trump administration. They had multiple secretaries today as part of that announcement because it touches on defense and agriculture. They had multiple governors who they can pass state laws. This is something that we can encourage at the local and state level, to say, maybe we don't want the communist Chinese party buying up our farmland. Maybe we should think twice before we let them buy what we think is a critical resource. So I know it's a long answer, but again, the government's role, I think, is give us the facts so we can make healthy decisions for ourselves and stop funding both sides of the fight. Stop funding the junk food that goes to our kids.
It's just common sense. You don't want your enemy owning farmland in your country. That's right. That again, it's like that's a no-brainer. And if you asked any person walking down the street, do you want China to own our farmland? I guarantee they'd say no. That's crazy. So these, again, just common sense solutions that get twisted by the legacy media and very extreme progressives, and lies are told. I mean, how many lies have we heard about the big beautiful bill and everything else? And so we just often have to make the corrections. At least we can, because we're adults. When these lies are told in classrooms, our children don't know. They don't have the capacity, the knowledge, and the ability to reason so that they can, mentally even fight back. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that we're fighting, the misinformation, it stems because, as Melissa and I have learned, it started in preschool. They started very young, indoctrinating our kids and making them believe that here are the good guys and here are the bad guys. And, we're one of the bad guys, it turns out. And it's just shocking.
Well, you think about and this is why it was so important to fight against DEI and critical race theory. You're exactly right. They try to brainwash our children at a young age. Think about the message that a young child gets, even as early as pre-kindergarten, where they're taught that everything the West has done, everything that America has done, everything that your parents believe in, your faith, your churches, are all on the wrong side, or all bad, or all evil, or all systemically corrupt and racist. And you talked earlier about individual responsibility. It's the exact opposite of individual responsibility, where you're guilty because you're a member of a group that you had no control over, by the way. You were born into this group. And because you were born into this group, you have this inherited guilt for all these things that happened hundreds of years ago to people you don't know, you've never met, that you never did. It's such an insidious mentality. And it's the opposite of meritocracy. It's the opposite of America as the land of opportunity. What we were taught growing up was, you're not promising equality of outcomes, you're promising equality of opportunity. This is a great country. You have more freedom than anywhere else in the world. It's not perfect, but it has done more to provide more freedom to more people over the course of time than any other nation in the history of the world. And that's why I always challenge the left when they're so keen to criticize America, so keen to tell us that everything we do is wrong. What other country has been a greater force for good? When you look throughout the history, and it's a relatively short history of our country, but what other country has done more in the history of the world to advance freedom, to advance equality, to advance opportunity, to advance liberty? Look, this is that Reagan said it best. He described this as that shining city on a hill. He a beautiful old metaphor that he used to describe why we're such an inspiration to people that love liberty and freedom. But the left hate that. And the left want to the most dangerous thing I think the left does. It's not, I don't like higher taxes. I don't like more spending. I don't like a lot of the things that they're for. But the thing that concerns me the most is they want to redefine what America is. They want to redefine. And to me, the most fun, and you said something earlier about our rights. And this is so important. Our founding fathers understood that government doesn't give us our rights. They created a very limited government to secure our God-given rights. These were rights endowed to us by our Creator. It's not that these rights started with the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. They simply were trying to form a government to protect our inherent rights. And I think that's so anathema to the left. They don't want our kids to learn that. They don't want them to understand that. They want to think that everything comes from government. And that's why the government, they believe, has the right to tell us how our kids should be educated, what foods they should eat, what kind of health care they get, and even these absurdities. I mean, look, some of the things that the left believes today, if you'd gone back in time and said, when I was a kid and said, look, there'll be a political party in the United States of America that's going to try to convince you that boys should be able to play in girls' sports, or that boys can pretend like they're girls, I would have thought that you were absolutely crazy. There's no way I would have thought in my lifetime that we would see a political party committed to that in America. And yet here we are in 2025 having these debates.
It is really incredible, that transformation that the left is pushing right now. You say that really well, that they want us to not see our rights as God-given, but instead granted by the government, and giving more and more control over the government, which leads me to my last question. That is, it's connected to health, but it's a little bit of a bigger picture perhaps on it. And that is this push towards health clinics in schools. And we've seen an increase in telehealth, school-based telehealth services, mental health programs, these off-campus recommendations and referrals to Planned Parenthood, and all of this getting conducted without parental consent. Obviously, these services are usually provided by activist organizations. They will gain politically and financially from these school-based healthcares, not to mention then it just gives more control to the government, and it gives the government more say instead of the parents. So just would love to hear, what is your opinion on, I think I know, but I'd love to hear you say it anyway, your opinion on schools functioning as healthcare providers, which is crazy, and concern. And are you concerned, such as that we are, that parents are going to be excluded, that we don't even have knowledge, much less the ability to consent?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, first of all, let's not pretend that schools are doing such a great job educating our kids that they have free time to go do other fun. That's what always amazes me from the left. They're like, well, schools, we're doing such a great job teaching reading and math and science. We're going to go ahead and try to teach your kids about sexual education, and we're going to try to become healthcare providers to your kid, and we're going to do mental health services to your kid, and we're going to be these, we're going to solve every problem in the world. We rank, you look at the international rankings, and you can, different rankings, we're 16th on some, we're not number one where we should be, right? On these international rankings, when you look at math and science scores and other international rankings, So it always amuses me when the left says we have yet another new responsibility for the schools. Well, why not stick to their core response? Like, why not do what we're supposed to do well? Like the schools are supposed to be educating our kids to be critical thinkers. Why don't we do that? And once we do that well, we can have this debate about all these other functions we're trying to give schools. But secondly, here's the other thing that's crazy to me. The left has managed to corrupt what used to be a pretty non-controversial idea, which was schools were there to teach reading, arithmetic, science, the writing, the basics. And yeah, you might have a school nurse. My schools didn't have a school nurse, but you might have a school nurse at a school who would put on a Band-Aid, or if you had a stomach ache, would make sure you were okay and then send you back to school and they'd send you back to class. So your mom and dad didn't have to come get you for every little ailment, but they were really there to just make sure the minor scrapes, like, if you fell down at recess, maybe put a cotton swab with some alcohol on a scratch or something. It was pretty basic stuff, pretty non-controversial. It was really just designed to make sure the kids weren't leaving school just because they wanted to get out of school. And what the left has corrupted that is exactly what you've said, where not only they're referring them to these outside providers, one, they're also billing Medicaid, and they're getting paid millions. It's become a huge revenue generator for a lot of these entities through government funded programs and government grants and foundation grants. But here's where it really, to me, offends me the most is you hit this on the head, where they try to do this without parental consent or even notification. Look, when my kids were younger, if you wanted the school nurse to give your child an aspirin, you had to sign 10 different forms and triplicate, and you had to, have a power of attorney, and they wouldn't do anything without the parents knowing, which was good. I mean, it was a little excessive, but at least you knew when your kid came home with a Band-Aid you didn't put on in the morning, you'd get a full report about why that had happened, what had happened, and everything like that. This idea, and it goes back into this ideology. It goes back into this ideology that they think they know what's better for our kids than we do. It goes back to this California law that they can try to indoctrinate our children in this, the gender identity nonsense without even telling the parents. It goes back to this idea that, it's amazing to me, the same people that will tell you, no, we can't give your child an aspirin without your knowledge, would then often say, oh, but by the way, it's okay for them to go to a Planned Parenthood clinic, get an abortion without the parents ever knowing about it. I mean, it's just absurd. It's a perversion of the correct parental role in terms of being the first caregivers for their children. We all know in excessive circumstances, when there is documented cases of parental abuse that are excessive and extreme, of course, the state should intervene and protect children. This is not that. This is the left trying to have schools, quote, protect children from conservative families when they disagree with our faith, with our values, with our beliefs. And to me, that is absurd. It should not be done at schools. It shouldn't be done anywhere. Certainly should not be done with our taxpayer dollars, but it certainly shouldn't be done at schools whose primary function is to educate our children, is to make sure they're critical thinkers. And I go back to where I started, it's not like we're doing a great job at the basics. Let's get back to the basics. Before we add all these other things that we want schools to do, why not actually go back to the basics and go back to where we started? I will say a couple of movements I'm glad to see in schools. Jonathan Haidt has pioneered this. Yep. Let's lock up the screens in schools so our kids aren't on
You're getting to my final question.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'll let you ask the question before I give the answer. But to answer your question, I'm very disturbed. And I think this is part of the pattern where the left thinks they know what's better for our kids than we do. And as a parent, I don't want any government bureaucrat, I don't want any government official providing healthcare to my daughter, my sons, without my wife's and my not only knowledge but prior consent as well. So I think it's just absurd to try to do that and then bill us for it. By the way, and let's make no mistake about it; they're making millions and millions of dollars. I applaud many provisions in the one big beautiful bill. Defunding Planned Parenthood could not have happened fast enough. I tried to do that when I was in office back then. The Obama administration, the courts were trying to stop us. So it's good. And now you've got a judge trying to, he forgot he was a judge. Now you've got a judge trying to take over the executive branch and try to undo that. I think the Supreme Court will fix that. But I was very pleased to see them defund, or at least they all say defund. It's not defunding. We're simply saying, don't send our taxpayer dollars to Planned Parenthood. If they can go raise private dollars, good for them, but they shouldn't have our dollars.
Yeah. And what I think a lot of parents don't realize and grandparents don't realize until they talk to someone from Moms for Liberty or attend an event from M4LU is that Planned Parenthood is the #1 supplier of comprehensive sexuality education curriculum to American public education. So they are getting funded, and that's why at Moms for Liberty we supported defunding Planned Parenthood, because they provide the curriculum and the content for comprehensive sexuality education, which is actually like extremely controversial. It's inappropriate, starts very young, and is more about ideology and exposing kids to extreme sexual content than it is about the traditional birds and the bees. This is not the human growth and development class that we Gen Xers, that we had as kids. This is something else, and it's very extreme. And the majority of parents, when they see the books, when they see the curriculum, they reject it and they want to opt their kids out. And there were school districts that were simply saying, nope, you cannot opt your kids out. And they were infusing this curriculum into even English, math, what have you. Just like what you said, Governor Jindal, instead of focusing on the mission, which is to teach kids reading and math and science and STEM and music and art, they, instead of doing those core things, they are using that precious time that they have in the classroom. And it is precious. There isn't a whole lot of time to teach kids the subjects so that these kids can perform at a level that's competent. They're using it to be activists. And if you heard on the news, NEA had their big conference this weekend, and what did they say? Teaching is a political act. One by one, these activist educators got on stage to say, this is political. We're going to sign our students up to vote. We use our classrooms as a place to which we can essentially brainwash kids into hating President Trump, vilifying Republicans and conservatives and Christianity. It's shocking and appalling that they're willing to say the quiet part out loud, but they certainly are.
Look, I think one of the things that President Trump has accomplished, he's fighting for so many of our rights and freedoms. He's driven the left crazy. So now they say extreme things out loud because they're just so angry. They can't believe that a majority of Americans have repeatedly voted for freedom and have said, we don't want this. So you're exactly right. It's almost, if what they were saying wasn't so dangerous, it would almost be entertaining watching them go crazy and say these insane things out loud. Look, there are many phenomenal teachers in the classrooms I know that don't agree with this ideology that's being said on their behalf. I can't tell you how many Christian teachers and believers and conservative teachers I would meet every day in Louisiana. They would come to me and say, hey, look, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with what the union says. And a lot of them are in unions for many different reasons, whether it's benefits or they feel like they have to be in the union or social pressure or whatever. But I know there are many, many good teachers out there that these unions don't represent, that they're not speaking for them. They don't represent their true beliefs because they're moms and dads too. And a lot of these teachers, they wouldn't want their kids being exposed to this. And it's no wonder so many parents are deciding they want their kids to have other choices. And here's the great thing about choice and competition. When you break up the monopoly, it's good for the kids that get these other choices. It's also good for the kids that go to public schools because it forces the public schools to be more responsive. If they know they're facing competition, they can't get away with this nonsense. But when they have a monopoly, you're exactly right. They can take this precious time and waste it on ideology instead of actually teaching students because they know parents don't have a choice. They know that you're legally mandated to send your kid there, and so they can do whatever they want. Once they face competition, it forces accountability, forces them to actually be more responsive to parental concerns. Like in the old days, if a parent had a concern, you could go talk to an administrator or a teacher. Now it takes a Supreme Court decision because you look at, and I know your members know this, sometimes you go to school board meetings, not only do the teachers and administrators don't care, the school board members simply don't care. And when the parents show up, they don't realize that they work for us. And so thank God for that Supreme Court ruling. Thank God that they didn't create the right, they reaffirmed the right the parents have to say, I don't want my kids exposed to this filth. I know that in one of our local schools, one of the schools was trying to, and this was not around sexual education, this was more around critical race theory. And one of the parents was very upset and said, well, fine, then I'd like to come and listen too. If you're going to invite these radical speakers, I want to come. And that kind of scared the administrators. I think they canceled the lecture series after that. They really didn't want parents hearing some of this nonsense.
So as a governor, would your advice to parents be get involved locally? Because that's our advice. Get involved in your school board. Get involved in your common council. the more local that you can get involved, that's where you can really affect change. Just showing up and being there, a small group watching, say we care. Does that make a difference?
Absolutely. I could not emphasize that or agree with that more. When you look at what happens at the local level, and we saw this, for example, in a couple of different areas when when schools were closed because of COVID in some districts, you saw even in fairly purple or liberal districts like in Northern Virginia, you had a lot of suburban moms that showed up for the first time. I think one of the reasons that Governor Youngkin won his election was there were a lot of frustrated moms that didn't normally vote Republican that said, this is ridiculous. Our kids need to learn. They need to go back to school. And these closures are hurting them for no good reason. You saw the same thing in San Francisco. I mean, I'm not saying that they've become this bastion of conservative freedom, but they were so radical, at a time of school closures and poor outcomes. They were debating about naming schools after Abraham Lincoln and other historical figures and Thomas Jefferson, all these. So I don't remember exactly which historical figures, but they were having these debates about taking names off schools and rewriting American history. Even liberal parents out there said enough is enough and started recalling members and saying that, no, we want more moderate school board members, city council members, prosecutors. And you saw a lot of things that you never would have imagined happen. If it can happen even in liberal San Francisco, if it can happen in purple Virginia, it can happen anywhere. And so absolutely, I encourage moms and dads, but especially moms, show up. Not everybody's called to run, but if you're called to run for office. Volunteer for a campaign, go to a school board meeting, go to your kid's school. One of the things we learned, and Riley Gaines showed this with, the whole issue of sports and female sports, is there's a large, quiet majority that agrees with us. There are a lot of people that don't agree with us on everything we believe, and that's okay. But on a lot of these issues, they do believe. I gave a speech several years ago at the Reagan Library, the Presidential Library, about religious liberty. And my appeal to the left was, you may not agree with me as a Christian. You may not share my socially conservative views, but hopefully you agree with my right to have those views and live by those views in America. And I think there's still common ground where we can appeal to the conscience of folks out there. And I think this is why the whole war on woke has worked and is working so well, that we can appeal to folks out there. You may not agree with our conservative views, but hopefully you agree with our right to have that debate and to hold those views without being punished. We shouldn't be fired from our jobs. We shouldn't be discriminated against with school admissions. We shouldn't be, left out because we have these beliefs. By the way, these beliefs that used to be pretty commonplace in America, these beliefs that used to be, the vast majority of people held in America. And I still think that there are enough Americans that hold those small L liberal beliefs in free speech and open debate and religious liberty and pluralism that I think we can appeal to them. I also think that, look, it's, and I don't want to be too religious about this, but it's also like evangelism. Part of this is just proselytizing and planting seeds. You never know, by showing up and making the argument, you can persuade the skeptical. That a lot of people, for a lot of people, this is really theoretical until they have their first child. It's easy to have one position until it's your child going to school. I think Mark Twain had, or it may have been him that first said this. It was amazing how much smarter his father got the older he got, right? Like, it's just one of those things. Once you have kids, it's amazing. As you grow older, you realize, oh, that's why dad punished me. Oh, that's why mom didn't let me do what I wanted to do. And so absolutely, I encourage, and I know you guys are doing this, and I know your listeners are doing this, and that's why you guys are involved, but encourage your friends to show up. Encourage your friend. It doesn't take much. I'm not saying that you have to drop everything you're doing and run for office, but go to a meeting, ask a principal a question, show up at the classroom, ask your teacher, what are you teaching my kids? Why are you teaching my kids this? Have you thought about this other speaker? Have you thought about this other textbook? Have you thought about this other perspective? And you'd be amazed what big changes you can accomplish just by showing up. The other side has showed up. If we show up, I think we can be very successful.
I think you make a great point there about there is common ground. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's common ground. It feels like we're only, and I think that's quite frankly because most of mainstream media and many of the very loud minority is the very extreme, and they're extremely loud. And which makes it feel like there's no chance for common ground because they are shouting people down. They won't let us talk. They don't actually feel that it's okay for you to have those beliefs, even if you disagree. The difference, and I agree with you, is that the vast majority of people in America, I do believe, still see the benefit to common ground. And that's really what we're trying to do, is find ways to help bridge that or cross the aisle, if you will, and find ways to open the conversation again. Because the last 5, 8, 10 years, it's like that was kind of the initiative, was shut down the conversation. You're not allowed to have the conversation. And we're starting to see that come back, which I'm very happy to see. I want to go back to the idea of moderation and also being involved, because that touches on another area, one of the other topics that we'll be talking about at M4LU in the fall, and that's screens, ed tech and devices, and how that is vastly impacting our kids. So, we already talked about how our parents knew better, our moms knew better about moderation in food. And we had that great foundation growing up of understanding that you can have ice cream, you just don't get it every single day for every single meal. But similarly, we had this experience of having screens at minimum in TVs for most of us as well, then going through the technology revolution and getting smartphones come in. But we had the foundation of living a life offline. Yep. And now, unfortunately, we're seeing just such a massive increase in actual screen addiction. And very true, to the point that there is inpatient services, inpatient counseling services for kids to get unaddicted, or to get what's the word, detoxed, essentially. Wow. From social media and screens, which is just so sad. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on this, on some real actionable steps that we could take, practical solutions that parents can do when we're seeing schools replace textbooks with Chromebooks. How at home and in schools, kids have far too much access to these screens, and they're expected to use them. That's the worst thing too. So what can parents do? How do we advocate to the school board, to the state, and even up to the federal levels to remove this?
Sure. So I'm going to date myself. You're exactly right. So I remember when I was a kid growing up, I have a younger brother, sports fanatic. And so for our parents, the limit was TV back then. It wasn't, before smartphones and the internet. And yes, there was life before all that. I know our kids think that was impossible. I can't imagine how we possibly lived in the Stone Age. But I remember my brother, if you let him, would have watched hours and hours and hours of TV. And so my parents were very strict about this, and we still laugh about this. Back in the day when you actually had a TV guide, it was a publication, a weekly publication.
I remember that.
The TV listings. My brother, ahead of time, he was given a very strict amount of time he could watch TV. He had ahead of time circled the shows that he was going to watch, or the pro games or whatever, so he didn't exceed his limit. So then my brother got very clever. Again, he was my younger brother. He would show up and he would ask, he was like, well, don't you want to watch like this game or whatever? And then he would get you to turn the TV on and sit in there. And he would argue that wouldn't count against his time. My parents cracked down on that and said, no. If you're in the room with the TV on, that counts against. And I remember the big fight. Like, we weren't allowed to have TVs in our room because they were afraid they would never see us again. Mm-hmm. If we had a TV in our bedroom, that we would never come out of our rooms. And so you're right. This is not a new fight. This is a fight that's been going on a long time. Here's the difference. And I think this is really important. We can talk about what parents and what schools and states can do. Here's the difference. We've seen from insider testimony that some of the biggest social media companies have deliberately, we were talking about this about food products before, now with digital and social media products, have deliberately created products that they know are addictive to our kids, that are not good for our children's social health and well-being. And you see this debate around the age verification. Many states, mine included, have passed these laws at a very minimum, just saying, look, if you have adult content websites, that you have an obligation to verify the age before you let a user on your website, so children aren't being exposed to these materials. And it's become really popular. And a lot of these adult entertainment sites are now shutting down in certain states or countries, saying, we don't want to do the verification, kind of exposing how much that they're preying on our children. But it's not just the adult content sites. You've got these other social media companies. And again, you've got whistleblowers who've stepped forward saying they know, and it's particularly harmful, not only, but particularly harmful to young girls. And it's just awful. Some of the studies and the anecdotes you hear about, the fear of missing out, the anxiety, the depression, the poor self-images, and all of, the self-harm and all of the other forms of online bullying and abuse, that the makers know their products are facilitating this. And because it helps addict kids and it allows them to sell advertising, and they're monetizing our children's attention. So let's be clear about this. They pretend that we're giving you free products. Why would you be against us? We're giving you free stuff, but they're monetizing, they're making money off of our children's attention. They make more money the more addicted our children are. And they've got liability protections. And so they don't have a strictly fiduciary responsibility to do what's always best for our children. And I think parents need to understand that. Need to understand what we're going into, because it's a lot harder than what it was when we were kids. When our parents were raising us, they didn't have these big, very sophisticated algorithms and companies working to addict our kids on content that's not necessarily good for them. In many cases, harmful. Now, look, we're not demonizing every social media platform or every device out there. We're not saying that kids have to grow up without devices. That's not the solution. But there are many things, starting at the federal level, going all the way down to the state, local, and parental level. At the federal level, they can revisit some of these liability protections some of these companies have been giving. There's been a lot of debate about tech companies' ability to censor conservatives, to amplify certain voices. You saw they were in bed with the Biden administration to censor people who turned out to be right, by the way. All these people that were speaking about COVID and about vaccines and about, all these different alternative theories with the origins of COVID. It turns out we have to come up with a new term for my senator from my state says we need to come up with a new term for conspiracy theories, because all the old ones are turning out to be true. So we need to come up with a new name for them. So in addition,
we're fortune tellers.
That's right. Truth tellers, fortune tellers. Instead of, in addition to fighting the suppression of free speech and bias against conservatives, we need to have a real discussion and real reform at the federal level about the liability protections for these large tech companies and platforms, to say you can't have it both ways, right? Like, if you're going to be publishers and censor certain voices, you then can't say, well, we bear no liability for what gets done on our platform. You have to pick. You can't, this is a little bit trying to have it both ways. And I commend, there are people like Senator Josh Hawley and others who not only have tried to do this at the federal level, they also did this at the state level when they were attorneys general. So you have many attorneys general in Missouri and Texas and Louisiana that are trying to hold these tech companies accountable and saying, okay, big tech, if you're going to be selling these products to our children, let's make sure you're actually doing so in ways that are not harmful to our children's social and mental health. So that can be done at the federal level, it can be done at the state, mainly the attorney general, but there are all state laws like age verification and other things that can be done. But going down into our schools and local government, I'd mentioned Jonathan Haidt before, and not only in America, but in other countries, been very successful at getting schools to lock up these phones, lock up these electronic devices during the school day, and saying, let's have a day without distractions. Let's have a day where we're encouraging attention, where we're, kids already struggle with short attention spans. Let's not make it worse. Let's give them an environment where they can actually sit still and listen and learn, and they're not looking at text. They're not looking at, they're not obsessed with who is saying what about whoever on their devices. At home, I think we can try to set those limits the way that my parents did with my younger brother and me with TV. But let's admit it's harder. Now, it's harder than our parents had it. There are programs and there are things. We all have these different things on our kids' phones where we could detect how often they were using it. We have parental controls, what content they could see. We had, as they get older, we have like different apps that tell us where they are if they're doing something risky. Like when your kids become drivers, you can find out how fast they're driving. I will say there's a balance, because I do think we want to make sure our kids aren't abusing these digital devices, but I also think we want to let them grow up and learn responsibility as well. We don't want to become the extreme version of helicopter parents where we're trying to protect them from everything. And here's where I think, instead of it just being a negative thing, I think the way to make it a positive thing is what worked with our kids, and this is very anecdotal, is we have to fill their lives with alternative activities. So our kids played sports. Our kids were active in their church youth groups. Our kids were so busy physically being with other kids, they didn't have a lot of time. Now, yes, they were on Snapchat, and yes, they were on different devices more than we would like, but our kids are well-rounded. They had a healthy, balanced set of activities, part of, I think what happens is kids, if you notice that your kids are coming home and they're not socializing, they're not getting out of their rooms, they're not, they're maybe spending too much time playing video games or on social apps. Doesn't mean they can't have those things, but you fill their days, their afternoons with other things, where if they have to go to a team sport, if they have to go play a musical instrument, they have to go to an art class, whatever it is that's best for your kid, whatever it makes sense for your child, I think that you create more healthy connections where they don't get sucked into everything being online. And it gives them a better perspective. And they read something online, it doesn't resonate with their real experience where they're real life friends. They understand that the difference between anonymous things online versus actually having a real human connection with somebody in person. And, I remember this seems silly, but it worked. When your kids were young, you just run them so much that they're so tired. They have so many play dates and activities and sports, so that when it's bedtime, they just want to go to bed, right? They're so tired, you exhaust them. And it really is creating healthy alternatives for them, so that they don't just come home from school and have these several hours where there's nothing to fill that time but social media and electronic devices. I think that's what we as parents can help create. And for our kids, sports and extracurricular clubs and activities and youth group and mission trips are a very big part of that. And, it gets to the point where you're not making them do it. They look forward to doing it. They love doing it. And they're the ones pushing you, saying, Mom, we got to go to the baseball practice. Or, Mom, we got to go to whatever it is that your kids like doing. So federal laws, there's a role for federal laws. There's a role for state attorneys general. There's a role for school bans on these devices during the day. But there's also a role for parents to put limits and to create alternative experiences for our kids.
Amen.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah, I support that. I have to anecdotally say that I was 100% one of those kids who loved TV, and I can so relate to your brother's experience of circling TV guide things and figuring out ways to watch more. I mean, that just speaks to me.
Well,
I have
there
to
was
say,
no, you couldn't pause. You couldn't, back in the day,
Yeah.
you understand, if you missed a show, you just missed a show. That was it.
Yeah.
And you had no idea what happened. There could be a cliffhanger and you never knew who shot J.R. Ewing or whatever it was. Right? That was
Exactly.
wait
that
for
was too bad.
reruns. But it's hard to believe. I was just thinking about that. I know we have to wrap things up, but that my parents let me out into the world, and there's no cell phone. They had no idea where. It's okay, Mom, I'm gonna go stay the night at my friend's house. No tracking on my phone. No Life 360. No texting. Did you get there? No. It's kind of bizarre now, because with my own kids, I have them on Life 360. I see where you're at. Turn your Life 360 on and call me there's some good things where you can keep track of them. And one big thing, I don't allow computers, phones, or TVs in their bedroom. So
Yes.
full screens in
Agreed.
bedroom. If they want to watch TV, it has to be downstairs. If they're going to be on their computer, it's going to be, there's study areas downstairs. It's and believe me, they're sneaky, and they try to.
Oh yeah.
They try.
Well,
And-
if you can set limits. I think that makes tremendous. We have no devices at dinner, no devices in church. They're
Yeah.
you set up these no device zones, and they learn they can live without it, and life won't end. I will say, so here's the great irony, because I was raised by the same kinds of parents you were raised. When I was raised, my parents, my mom, she would say, go out and play. And during the day, during summer breaks, we'd just go out and play until it was dark, and you'd end up at somebody else's house for
Yep.
lunch. You'd run around on your bike or whatever. And they had no idea. There was no tracking. There was no whatever. Today, my parents live near us. When they came over for dinner last night, I was like, all right, Mom, text me when you get home. I want to make sure you got home safe. It's so funny how all of that has changed. The things our parents let us do when we were kids would be called child abuse today. They would just let's go play. And they'd had no idea where we were for hours and hours at a time. But the difference was your neighbors looked out for you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you did anything wrong, your neighbors would punish you before you got home. And your mom would find out before you got home, before you could tell her. And so everybody did that. You weren't the only one out there, on the sidewalks playing with your friends. You just went outside and played because there was nothing else to do. It wasn't that that was what kids did, back in the day. And I think that, again, it goes back to moderation and common sense. We give our kids enough enough physical activities, enough real connections. But here's why I've got so much respect for moms and dads, in that, look, it's a lot tougher in today's world to being a responsible parent. There's so many new dangers and threats and opportunities for your kids to get off the right path that it just takes a lot. I mean, parents, I don't say this glibly. It's easy to say, oh, go do this. We're raising 3 kids. It's a lot of work. And that's why I've got so much respect for moms and dads that are involved in their kids' lives, that know what they're doing, and create these healthy alternatives.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth it, but the onus is on us, and I think it's good to differentiate like what the government can do and what the government can't do and what we really don't want them to do. Well,
Amen.
it would be an easy fix, but it would probably blow up in our face, when you give the government this kind of power. It's just like Star Wars movie. They never relinquish it. They're like, oh, I'll have this power just for a little while. And then then I'll relinquish it, of course. It's like, no, when they take an inch, it just keeps going and going. And then you wake up and suddenly parental rights is a thing of the past and the government is going to raise your kids. And that's why we've got to do our part, but we've got to help. There are a lot of parents that maybe they didn't have the kind of great parenting that we had with parents that looked at everything like a teachable moment. It doesn't matter that my parents didn't have a college education. They were such good parents because they cared so much. They loved us so much, and they were strong, conservative Christian parents that did everything they could to make sure that we would grow up to be good people. And some that's the greatest privilege of all. That is the greatest privilege that any child can have, is a loving, caring parent that really will do everything they can to raise a good human. And so at Moms for Liberty, at America First, we're trying to offer tools to the parents that maybe they didn't have that kind of upbringing, but they want to provide that for their kids. So we're trying to help them. Like, here are the tools, here are the things that you can do that will make sure that you are the kind of parent that you always wanted to be.
Well, I commend you for your great work, and thank you for not only what y'all do every day to create those alternatives, because you're right. Look, not everybody had those great parents or the great upbringing, but we can create that for our children. It is a lot of work, but there are resources out there to help you, right? There are church groups, there are parent groups, there's Moms for Liberty, there are all kinds of other groups to help support that. And you're exactly right. This is not a job you can outsource to government. There are no shortcuts to this. Having a child is the greatest blessing in the world. It is a tremendous responsibility. And it's not, a lot of parents, I think, my fear is when things get complicated, it's very tempting. The left always offers these bumper sticker solutions. Just let government take over. Let the government take over healthcare. Let government take over making it. That sounds good, but it never works out, right? There's a reason it's never worked out in the history of the world. It's never worked out in any other country. It's not going to work here. And so I commend you guys for providing that alternative and being that resource for moms that want to do the right thing, for moms and dads that want to raise their kids and teach them to prize and value liberty, and then to share those values with their own kids one day.
Well, thank you so much for coming on with us. This was a great conversation. Like I don't, it's been an hour and a half. I don't want it to end. I love everything that you said. I hope that we can talk again soon. And I know that I think, Melissa, you can talk about the upcoming school year. We're really going to be focusing on health and screen time and what's in food and school lunches. So if you want to talk about that a little bit more, but thank you, Governor Jindal, for coming on. We really appreciate it. And I really hope that we can talk again soon.
Well, thank you both very much for having me. It was great being with you today.
Great. And I do want to say I'm probably going to be reaching out because I have really enjoyed talking to you. I really appreciate your insights. And yes, just like Scarlett said, our topics we're talking about MAHA, essentially with food and pharma, how that affects kids. We'll be talking about screen time, data collection, and AI, which is in and of itself kind of terrifying. Let's be real. Robots are definitely coming for us. We will also be touching on social media and the incredibly sad increasing porn addiction that we are seeing in kids. So I have a feeling that I will be in touch with you.
I look forward to that.
All right. Thank you. Melissa and I are going to close everything out, but thank you for coming on and hope to talk to you soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you, guys. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Bye.
Bye now.
See you.
That was a great conversation. And I'm really looking forward to what you're going to be doing in the fall. Like there's just so many things to talk about. The screen time is one. AI. I didn't even get to the data collection that our kids, Chromebooks. We think, oh, isn't it great? They're giving our kids these Chromebooks free. And it turns out they're data mining what
Yeah.
our kids are doing. And our kids are able to go on Snapchat and they're putting personal information on there and they're shopping on there. I've had situations where it's like they're about to put my credit card number on, and I'm like, whoa. You can't buy anything on here. Like they're buying an app, like, oh, I need this app for school. Mom, can I use your credit card? No. Oh my gosh.
No.
So you can, I know I'm frustrated because you can be so diligent about screen time. And then they're like, but it's homework. I have to go on, and it's all on the
on the Chromebook
and Google Docs and Google Classroom. And what multiple children, I'm supposed to stand there over and like make sure every minute that they're doing schoolwork and they're not doing something else. And so it's hard.
It is a challenge. I will say, like the research for this has been ridiculously eye-opening, and I'm looking forward to talking to some people to try to get some real genuine solutions. If nothing else, like there's not always going to be a full solution, right? Like we're probably not going to be able to get all schools to cancel Chromebooks and one-on-one devices. It's just not going to happen. But what are some ways
it can be useful? Like there is some good to that. It's just now everything, they're not reading books anymore. Like it's all, they're not printing very much. Like balance.
Well, and the science, the crazy thing though, is that the science actually shows how bad it is. Like you don't retain information the same when you're reading on a screen versus reading on a book. You don't retain the best way and I've known this for years, but the best way to retain when you're learning as well, if you're taking notes, if you write it, then you have a significantly better, I can't remember the exact statistics, but that versus even typing it. I want to say for writing, it's like 70% retention. And for typing it, it's something like 40% retention, something like that. And it's just that alone is such a big difference. And you add all of that up and to think that, and it genuinely isn't our kids' fault. That's really one of the biggest things to remember. And also, like, I'm going to be giving a lot of encouragement to parents because I was very much like, my kids came up during this time where we were just sold the lie that this is the greatest thing in the world. And my background's in technology. So I was like, yeah, technology, isn't this going to be great? And then I started to go, wait a second, this just doesn't seem so great. There's something's not right. And we as parents are going to have to give ourselves a little bit of grace because we genuinely didn't know, but now we've got to do something about it. And it's so important.
Listen, my kids, it was like for birthday presents, they got iPads, they got phones, and I was considered a parent that was strict because I was waiting until 6th or 7th grade to give my kids a phone. Yeah, I was like a strict parent. And so, and
I was made fun of because I put parental apps on it. My friends made fun of me. They were like, oh, you're just a helicopter mom. I was like, are you kidding me? No, these devices are insane.
Yeah, my kids had like my old laptops. After COVID, it's much harder, and I had to rewind. Started off with getting them all flip phones to detax them, and they like, you are the worst mom ever. You are the worst. You're the worst mom. And then they slowly like got to have an iPhone again as they got older. And my 13-year-old just got an iPhone, and we're already taking it away. We're like 1 month and we're like, nope, too soon. Yeah. You're going crazy already. Like she was fine. And then it's like, they're just so consumed by it. And we thought, well, you know what, for her, we're just gonna have to take it back and wait a little bit longer. And it's hard. It's hard when most kids have phones and most kids have their laptops all the time, and you're kind of trying to keep track. I've like several safes in my house where we have to keep all the stuff in safes. I would sleep with it next to my bed, and I'd hear little footsteps like at night as they're trying to get their stuff in the middle of the night.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to put everything in a safe. And that's just a natural thing for any kid.
Oh yeah.
It's completely their lifeline. It's like, I want to talk to my friends. I want to see you. I can't let I forget what they call it on Snapchat, that they've got to answer.
Oh, there's streaks.
There's streaks.
That's the one thing I will say. Whatever you do, don't let them on Snapchat. Snapchat is in.
It's funny because when I knew nothing about Snapchat, my older kids that now are like, oh, Snapchat's so lame. But they're like, yeah, you should don't let Bella, or the youngest, don't let her on Snapchat. Don't let her have a Snapchat account. And I'm like, well, you guys had one. Like, yeah, you shouldn't, because you can be monitored by all of your friends. There's so much I don't even understand about it, but don't let them have a TikTok account.
Oh gosh, no.
It's really hard. All their friends, even whether they're going to a Christian school, they all have TikTok accounts. So if you're not letting your daughter have a TikTok account, be prepared for the meltdowns.
Yeah.
It's had one. Just went through that yesterday. I'm the only one that doesn't have a TikTok.
Yeah, I know that feeling, and I
love you too much. Sorry, honey.
Yeah, that's the perfect response. I love you. Not that they get it yet, but they will. They will someday.
So the screen one, it's a hard one. I don't even, and I've heard two sides of the debate of, like, I want my kids to have a phone because I want them to be able to contact me or record. Like, what if something's happening in the school and they can record it, and then I know. And I kind of wish I'm kind of like no screens. I don't know why my 6-year-old can call me in high school. Like, you should not be able to call me 10
Go to
times.
the payphone.
And usually it's nothing super important, but
no,
I'm kind of like, I think it's so distracting for them. I think it's hard. It makes it hard for teachers to do their job.
Yeah.
What a great interview. Wow. Governor Jindal is brilliant and such a steadfast conservative. I remember when I was younger watching his rise, and I'm so glad to see that he is working with AFPI, that he is developing policy in a field that he is extremely, extremely competent in. Just a brilliant guy. And, advising the president, working with America First Policy Institute on healthcare policy, the guy who revolutionized healthcare in Louisiana is now going to help revolutionize healthcare in the country. And boy, we sure need it. We need to provide high quality healthcare at an affordable price, and we need to get the government out. And as far as education, boy, there are so many areas in which, under the Biden administration, but even before then, the government used healthcare as an inroad into public schools, into communities, and into usurping the role of parents. And it's, it starts with, hey, we're going to provide lunch. Then we're going to provide breakfast. Then we're going to have, we're going to have a little bit of healthcare. Maybe we'll have a nurse. And then suddenly there's clinics. And then there's dental care. Yes, dental care. That is happening in some schools where they take kids offsite without parents' permission, provide dental care. How about eye care? We had a big story in Michigan with Moms for Liberty where eye care services and glasses were being provided to children without parents' consent. And it's happening. And I think that as parents, we don't want to relegate our job to the government. It's not a good idea. What does the government do so well that you are willing to let them raise your children? Nothing. They don't do anything so great and it's so fabulous that, hey, you know what? Raise my kids. Provide them healthcare. Put on, let's take care of their braces and their eyewear. No. This is our responsibility, and it is our job and our right to raise our kids. and you just don't want to give that job to a bureaucracy, particularly one that is woke and revolutionary and kind of hates America. So not a great idea. There's so much that I wanted to say, but we're going to have to save that for another podcast, as we are getting close to, we're well over an hour and a half. But time flies when you're having fun and you're learning so much. And there was so much wisdom given by Governor Bobby Jindal and Melissa Karwowski. She says, put the wow in, who is the director of M4LU. And I'm so excited about the things that we are going to be doing in 2025, 2026. And Melissa is just so organized, so fabulous, and she does so much research. So she's got big plans, and I am so grateful that I get to be a part of it. And in my position, I'm going to try and help amplify all the work that she's doing and all the work that our team at Moms for Liberty is doing. So I am going to outro with a little video about the Moms for Liberty Summit. And let me tell you, I was on a call today, top secret, cannot discuss some of the guests that we are inviting and some that are already in the process of RSVPing. Yes, they are great. They are fabulous. This is going to be an amazing summit. And bonus, it's in Orlando, Florida, October 16th through the 18th at the Gaylord Resort, which is basically this little, there are swimming pools and wave pools, and it's fabulous. So you can bring your entire family and, stay a little bit longer and enjoy your time there, and then attend the summit and get enriched, empowered, educated, and ready to take on the school year and fight for your kids and fight for your community and have fun while you're doing it. I have made the best friends when I attend the summit. I always meet new people. I make new friends from all over the country, and we stay in touch to this day. And now we're even working together and talk all the time and see each other a lot more now that we're headed up to DC a little bit more. So I can't recommend it enough. And if you are a leader in Moms for Liberty, a chapter chair, there are lots of opportunities for you to attend on scholarship as well. So anyway, anyone can attend. There are still tickets available. Probably won't be a whole lot of tickets available once we start announcing the lineup of speakers and sessions and panels. It's going to be epic. So take my word for it. Can't say anything yet. Told Tina I wouldn't say anything, but really go. And here's the part where I need to let you know where to go. So if you want to register for the Moms for Liberty Summit, just go to momsforliberty.org. If you want to become a member of Moms for Liberty, that's where you go to. So go to momsforliberty.org. Right at the top, you're going to see register for Summit and information about Summit. We also have images and all the speeches from previous summits, so you can get a sample of what happens. But it's nothing like you have to be there. It's great. It's fabulous. So get your tickets now while they're available. They will not be. We sell it every year. So, and please don't forget to follow Moms for Liberty. I am the multimedia social media manager. So follow us on X at moms4liberty. That is the same social media handle for Facebook and Instagram. Follow us on YouTube as well. We have lots of great content. We're uploading more all the time. And that is where you can find episodes of The Fire of Liberty with Tina Deskovich. And what else we want to see? Oh, M4LU, if you would like to see the vast amount of information and toolkits that we have on many of the subjects that we talked about with Governor Jindal, go to m4lu.org and it's all there waiting for you. There are videos, toolkits, links, articles, everything that you need. And to learn more about America First Policy Institute, go to americafirstpolicy.com. It is well worth your while. I'm going to briefly show you, hold on real quick. Here we go. So this is a statement from Governor Bobby Jindal, and you will see a lot more statements like this. They have press releases, they have their own links, they have everything that you would need about many, many issues, and healthcare, education, foreign policy, defense, everything under the sun. They are a partner organization of Moms for Liberty. We love, love, love all of our friends at America First Policy Institute, particularly my good friend, Jorge. Hey, Jorge, he's great, fellow Puerto Rican. We love our friends at America First. They do great work, and the policy papers that they put out like mad, like crazy, blow your mind. And some of the best and brightest minds in conservatism, they are fellows and leaders at America First. So definitely check them out. And again, do not forget to check out Moms for Liberty and join us. So that will be it for Moms for Liberty Unplugged. I have a lot of great guests that will be coming up. July is going to be my vacation month. I'm going to be spending time with my family, but I still will be able to put out some more episodes, maybe not as many as I was, and still will be going to DC a few times. But August, watch out. August is going to be exploding for Moms for Liberty. So enjoy the time with your family, enjoy the weekend, and enjoy summer. And heck, I live in Wisconsin, so when it's 90 degrees out, man, you got to enjoy it, because they're few and far between sunny, warm days in Wisconsin. So everyone, love ya. Have a great weekend. God bless. And God bless America. Bye.
Elena, what state are you from?
New York.
Hawaii.
I'm from Texas, Washington. I have my kids actually with me to do the march.
Wherever I go, odds are there is a Moms for Liberty group or a whole tribe in the room sounding off loud and proud.
And you could see the passion here because it's about supporting kids.
Pledge to each other that we will live like men and women who are determined to remain free.
I'm for parental rights all the way.